but I'll just maybe broaden that a little bit to operations in general. I think, candidly, one of the biggest challenges I have, and I think most operations professionals would agree with me, operations by definition can be a little bit nuts and boltsy. We're talking about things that need to happen. They're not the most exciting or the most, always innovative areas. And, they lack that luster that our sales and marketing colleagues have, or our market access colleagues. It's just much more nuts and bolts. But I think one of the biggest challenges I have is really finding ways to continuously infuse innovation and new thinking and communicate that accordingly. But at the same time, help the organization recognize like the nuts and bolts are still critical. Again, as I said in the beginning, like we are the engineers that keep the commercial engine going. So sometimes you need to use that, that unattractive wrench to keep things going. It doesn't mean that what you're doing is less valuable. It just means it's more foundational. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge that I hope other operations professionals can relate to. And hopefully I would be very happy to get advice on how best to approach that in the future.
Yeah, I feel like, I guess the way I would sum up the comment that you made is that I feel like operations leaders, at least the best ones that I've known, can both think strategically and operate very tactically when needed, right? So, yes, you're a leader. You need to, spend a good portion of your time kind of thinking where are you going overall as an organization. But I feel like the best operations leaders also are so in touch with the details. They just know kind of, one of the operations leaders that I had hired long ago, he had said, look, if you woke me up at 1 a.m., I would still be able to tell you all the details for where everything is right at this point in time, right? I wouldn't have to think about it. It's just essentially in my mind and there. So yes, I agree with you. I think that, that ability to kind of phase shift back and forth is something that not a lot of people have. But some of the best operations leaders that I know of, at least, they're able to kind of do that very well and sort of help the organization move from, what they plan to do to what they're doing, right?
And you know what, Don, if I can just build on that, because that's a great point. I think one challenge, but that also becomes an opportunity for us as operations leaders, is being able to translate some of those drier details into the WIFMs, the what's in it for me for the organization. So, to your point, like anyone who's going through budget process will appreciate, a lot of operations line items end up on a budget, and people kind of look at that and they, crinkle their nose and they go, I don't get it. Like, what is that? Why is that important? And it's really, the onus is on the operations leader to be able to explain why that, supposedly obscure detail or line item that costs, $400,000, why it's critical for the organization, what it's actually going to bring value around, and more importantly, how it's going to keep that engine going. So I completely agree with you and all the leaders that you've probably hired. There is a lot of that phase shifting, as you called it.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So how is Shinogi addressing the latest trends and challenges in the biotech and pharmaceutical sectors?
So first of all, very proud to be part of this company. I think the way I'll discuss that is I first want to kind of maybe mention what I think some of the key challenges in the pharma industry are. And I think the biggest challenge, so we can talk about, all of the like really annoying challenges, patient out of pocket is too high, the cost of drugs is too high, drug development takes too long. But I think when I was thinking about this and really boiling it down, to me, one of the biggest challenges the pharma industry has is how do we keep up? And what I mean by that is society and the medical kind of innovations that are ongoing every day, they're identifying new conditions, new diseases, new ailments much faster than the pharma industry can keep up in terms of developing those interventions. And so I would say that not just for my company, but for, the pharma industry in general, one of the biggest challenges we're facing is how do we continue to find, identify, develop, put resources and means against developing those key therapeutic interventions that are going to be safe, effective, and appropriate for those areas of high unmet need. And I think that's really an area where I'm particularly proud to be part of the pharma industry, because I know that every day when I wake up and I sit down at my laptop, somehow the work that I'm doing translates into helping patients. To me, that's the most important thing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, it is. And I certainly echo many of the things that you started with as well. Right, that
Mm-hmm.
this isn't an easy path or an easy industry to be a part of, and it receives
Mm-hmm.
a lot of criticism in general whenever there's a lot of contributing factors to a lot of the things that you talk about. Drug prices being high,
Yeah.
there's a lot of reasons why drug prices are high. And
Right.
there's a lot of reasons why they're not so high in other countries as well. So, I mean, I do
Yes.
feel like there is a level of that. And I just mentioned this in the interview with John LaMantina as well, that,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
similar sort of challenges that people, oftentimes just don't take the time to really understand. But at the same time, whenever it comes to things like COVID, or, you have a family member that unfortunately has cancer or some rare disease
Yeah.
that you'd love to have cured, wouldn't it be nice to have a drug company that has the ability and the research means to go out and not only research it, but place the drug where it needs to be whenever your care provider needs it? So, yeah, I
Exactly.
completely agree with you.
Yeah.
So, what's the greatest leadership advice that you've ever received?
Oh, so this one's thankfully an easy one. And it's because it's been repeated to me several times. And, some of the bosses and the leaders that I've had the privilege of knowing, I think they've exemplified this themselves. So it's very easy advice for them to give. And it's advice that I give myself every day. And I also happily impart it. I think it's really two things. The first is be authentic. Being your authentic self and showing up as your authentic self. I can think of three or four different areas or experiences where I suppressed my authentic self, and that really did me a disservice. It did the company a disservice. It did me a disservice. And I think that's where, it's okay to be a little goofy and silly if that's who you are. Let your goofy flag fly. That's okay. But be your authentic self. I think people respond to it, and then they naturally trust and believe and follow what you say because they know that you are coming from a good place and it's coming from a place of honesty and authenticity. I think the second really key leadership lesson or value that I've been provided is, again, communicate your values and communicate them often. So I think a lot of folks often say, well, you need to have values and, that's an important part. But it's like, yes, but if you keep them to yourself, nobody knows what they are. And sometimes it's hard to always discern what people's values are if they don't say anything. So for me, it's really communicate them often, make sure they're part of your vernacular, make sure they're part of the messages that you provide your team and your greater company. And I think those are really some of the best lessons I've learned over time.
Such a such an important point, not just for people that, let's say, I mean, with a large organization that you lead, I would
Mm-hmm.
imagine you're having to communicate things multiple times. But as an individual, whenever you think about people
Mm-hmm.
understanding your values, you may not think about how many people actually in your circle, in your immediate sphere, that need to really understand, where exactly you're coming from and kind of what your values are,
Yeah,
just so that they know who you are as an individual. So I
exactly.
feel like that's a really critical takeaway for anybody that's listening or watching as well.
Well, I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you. So, what inspires you?
So, pulling on that authenticity thread, I will say what inspires me is seeing someone or people or a team or a company, this could be, any entity that's genuinely excited by what they do, that they're passionate and they're excited and they aren't afraid to show it. I think there's um, again, I'm of the generation where I think we potentially might be a little entitled and feel like things should just come our way. That's what I understand, at least when I Google our generation. But that being said, I think there's sometimes a disconnect where there are folks in companies and in roles that are a little bit more sedate and feel like, okay, be a little bit more professional, hold it in, don't demonstrate enthusiasm on a constant basis. And for me, I don't think there's anything wrong with being enthusiastic and being excited about what you do. I don't think there's anything wrong with sharing that as long as it's, again, in an appropriate way. And so for me, that's really what gets me going in the morning when I see people who are just genuinely excited about what they do. Because I'm somebody who's genuinely excited by what I do, and I have no problem sharing that.